In the wild heart of Montana, one storm changed everything. A stranger's touch, a whisper in the rain, and a love too dangerous to resist. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Tell us, where are you watching from? Let's get started. The sun was setting behind the endless Montana plains, painting the horizon with shades of crimson and gold. Clara Bennett tightened her grip on the wagon reins as the wind began to howl across the open land. The storm clouds gathered fast, rolling in like a dark army. Her horse neighed nervously, hooves kicking dust from the cracked ground. She was miles from the nearest town, her supplies nearly gone, and the faint smell of rain in the air warned her that she didn't have much time before the skies opened up and swallowed her whole. The first drop of rain hit her cheek, cold as ice. Then another. Within moments, the storm unleashed its fury, pelting the earth with sheets of water. The wagon's wheels sank into the mud, creaking under the weight. Clara tugged on the reins, but her horse refused to move forward. Panic clawed at her chest. She climbed down, skirts heavy with rain, and saw the problem. A wheel had cracked clean through. Her heart sank. Alone, in the middle of nowhere, she felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Thunder cracked so loud it shook her to her bones. She tried to shield herself under the wagon, her trembling hands clutching her shawl. The lightning flashed across the plain, illuminating a silhouette in the distance, a rider, cutting through the storm. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but as the figure drew closer, she saw him clearly. A tall man in a long oilskin coat, riding a chestnut horse, his hat pulled low against the rain. The stranger moved with purpose, like someone who belonged to this land. He stopped a few feet away, his horse snorting steam in the cold. "You shouldn't be out here alone, ma'am," he said, voice deep, calm, and edged with authority. His tone carried the kind of weight that made people listen. Clara swallowed hard. "I didn't plan on it," she answered, her voice trembling. "My wagon wheel broke." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, boots sinking into the wet earth. Even soaked, he moved like someone in control, every gesture measured, deliberate. Without wasting words, he crouched beside the wheel, inspecting the brake. His hands were large, roughened by years of work, but precise as he touched the splintered wood. Clara tried to help, kneeling beside him. "Maybe if I hold it steady," she began, but he caught her wrist gently. His touch was firm, his fingers warm even in the cold. "Easy now," he murmured, his eyes lifting to meet hers. "You'll just make it worse." For a heartbeat, everything went still. The storm, the world, even her breath. That touch burned through her like fire, spreading from her wrist to her racing heart. She felt foolish for reacting that way, yet she couldn't look away from him. His jaw was square, a faint scar tracing down his cheek, and his eyes, gray like smoke, held something unreadable. He fixed the wheel with quiet determination, his movements efficient and strong. When he was done, he stood, rain dripping from his hat brim. "You'll be safe now," he said simply, stepping back toward his horse. She wanted to thank him, to ask his name, but the storm had other plans. Lightning struck nearby with a violent crack, hitting a tree not 20 yards away. Her horse screamed, bolting forward. The wagon lurched. Clara lost her footing and fell backward into the mud. Before she could hit the ground, he caught her, strong arms wrapping around her waist, pulling her close. She gasped, her face inches from his. His heart hammered beneath her palms, steady and powerful. For a second, they were frozen there, drenched and breathless, caught between fear and something far deeper that neither of them could explain. "It hurts," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. Her ankle had twisted, but that wasn't the only pain she felt. Something else stirred inside her, something dangerous and alive. His eyes softened, his grip tightening slightly as if he understood. "But don't stop," she breathed again, surprising even herself. The words slipped out before she could think, but she didn't regret them. The way he looked at her then, intense, searching, almost pained, made her heart ache in ways she hadn't felt in years. He lifted her gently, his arms steady around her shoulders. "You're hurt," he said. "Let's get you to shelter." They found refuge in an old barn nearby, its roof creaking but dry enough to keep the rain out. He started a small fire using broken boards, the orange glow casting shadows across his face. She watched him silently, her heart still racing. "You didn't have to help me," she said softly. He shrugged, removing his soaked gloves. "Couldn't leave you out there." "Not in this kind of storm." His voice carried a quiet sadness, like a man who knew what it meant to lose someone. As the fire crackled, Clara removed her wet shawl, her hands trembling. He turned away, giving her privacy, a small gesture that meant more than words. When he finally met her eyes again, something unspoken passed between them. Gratitude, curiosity, and a spark that neither could control. The wind outside roared, but inside that small barn, the silence between them grew heavy. "What's your name?" she asked. "Jack," he said after a pause. "Jack Carter." She repeated it quietly, tasting the sound like it was something she wasn't supposed to know. The storm raged through the night, but she barely noticed any more. Jack sat across from her, his gaze lost in the fire. He told her he worked a ranch a few miles north, that he'd been out checking fences before the rain hit. When she told him she was heading west to start over after her father's death, his expression changed, like he understood what that kind of loneliness felt like. They spoke little after that, words no longer needed. The fire flickered between them, shadows dancing like secrets neither dared to tell. When the rain finally eased, Jack stood and offered her his hand. "You should rest. I'll see you back to town at first light." She hesitated before taking it, his touch once again sending that same heat through her chest. Outside, the wind had softened to a whisper. She lay down near the fire, closing her eyes. Sleep came slowly, filled with the image of the man who had appeared from the storm like fate itself. And as dawn began to break across the plains, she knew deep down, whatever had started between them that night was only the beginning. The morning sun rose over the plains, its golden light spilling through the gaps in the barn's wooden walls. Clara stirred awake, the warmth of the dying fire brushing her cheeks. For a moment she thought the night's events had been a dream, the storm, the fall, the man who'd saved her. But then she saw him, Jack Carter, sitting by the doorway, his hat pulled low, watching the dawn as if it held something he'd lost long ago. He turned when she moved, offering a quiet nod. "You sleep well?" he asked softly. She smiled faintly. "I did, thanks to you." They rode into town together, the air still heavy with the scent of wet earth. Clara's wagon creaked behind them, but the road felt shorter now. She glanced at Jack as he rode beside her, calm, steady, silent. There was something about him that drew her in, not just his strength, but the sadness behind his eyes. When they reached the town's edge, she stopped. "You don't have to go any further," she said, unsure why she didn't want him to leave. He hesitated, then tipped his hat. "Maybe I'll see you around, Miss Bennett." And then he rode away. Weeks passed. Clara settled in a small cabin near the creek, trying to rebuild her life. She found work at the local trading post, her days filled with routine, until she saw him again. Jack stood outside the post one evening, loading supplies into a wagon. He looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more human. When he saw her, his lips curved into the faintest smile. "Didn't think you'd stay," he said. She shrugged, pretending not to care. "Didn't have much reason to leave?" Their eyes met again. That same silent pull between them, stronger now, harder to ignore. She started seeing him often. At the ranch, in town, sometimes just passing by on horseback. Each meeting felt accidental, but she knew it wasn't. There was something in the way he looked at her, like he was fighting himself not to get closer. One evening, she decided to stop wondering. She took a small basket of food and rode out to the Carter ranch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft gold. Jack was by the corral, mending a broken fence. When he saw her, he wiped his hands on his shirt and said quietly, "You shouldn't be here." "I brought supper," she said simply, setting the basket down. "And maybe I thought you could use some company." He froze, his jaw tightening. You don't know what you're asking for, Clara. She stepped closer, her voice steady. Then tell me. He didn't. Instead, he turned away, staring at the fading horizon. I lost someone once, he said finally, his voice rough. My wife. The fire took her, and everything else I was. His hands shook slightly as he spoke. Since that night, I swore I'd never let anyone close again. It's safer that way. Clara's heart ached at the pain in his words. She reached out and touched his arm. A simple gesture, but it made him flinch like it burned. You can't live your whole life hiding from the fire, she said softly. Sometimes it's the only thing that keeps us alive. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. For a long moment, the silence between them said more than words ever could. He reached out, almost hesitating, then let his rough hand trace her jaw. You're fire, Clara, he whispered. And I'm afraid I'll burn you. She smiled faintly. Maybe I want to burn. The air between them shifted. He leaned in slowly, his breath warm against her skin. When their lips met, it wasn't gentle. It was raw, desperate, aching. It was years of loneliness, loss, and longing colliding all at once. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close, and she melted into him like she'd belonged there all along. The world outside disappeared. No wind, no fear, no past. Just the sound of two hearts beating in rhythm, a promise neither had to speak aloud. When they finally pulled apart, she looked up at him, eyes glistening. What now? She whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he brushed a stray strand of hair from her face and said quietly, Now we start over, if you're brave enough to try. She smiled through the tears she didn't realize had fallen. I've never been brave, she said, but I'm not afraid of you. That night, they sat under the stars, the ranch quiet, except for the soft rustle of grass in the wind. Jack told her stories about his past, the days before the fire, the laughter he'd forgotten. Clara listened, her hand resting in his, and for the first time in years, he laughed again. The days that followed changed everything. They worked side by side on the ranch, mending fences, herding cattle, and slowly, piece by piece, healing each other. But the past has a way of finding its way back. One afternoon, a man rode into town, someone from Jack's past, carrying the kind of trouble he'd been running from. Clara saw it in Jack's eyes, that same fear, that same instinct to push her away. Don't, she said firmly when he tried. You can face it. We can face it. He wanted to argue, but her voice left no room for doubt. That night, when the trouble came, it came fast. A fire set to the barn, flames roaring into the night. Jack ran toward it, Clara at his side despite his protests. Smoke filled the air, memories of his wife's death flashing in his mind. But this time he wasn't alone. Together they fought through it, dragging the frightened horses out, coughing and stumbling, their hands clasped tight. When the last of the fire died, Jack fell to his knees, exhausted, trembling. Clara knelt beside him, cupping his face. It hurts, she whispered, tears streaking through the soot. But don't stop, not now. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like he'd never let go. I'm done running, he said, his voice breaking. The dawn came again, soft and golden, spreading light over the smoldering ranch. The fire had taken the barn, but not them, and not what they'd built together. Jack kissed her forehead, his hands shaking but sure. You saved me, he whispered. She smiled faintly. No, she said, her voice gentle as the morning breeze. You saved yourself. I just reminded you how. And as the sun climbed higher, painting the plains in gold, the rancher and the woman who tamed his fire began their new beginning. Together.